Good morning, Gerrie.
Good morning,
Karen. March 16th. Karen Harper interviewing Gerrie Schipske at Grounds Bakery.
Yes.
Did I say March?
Yes.
16th?
March 16th. Tomorrow, St. Patrick's.
So, what about St. Patrick's?
Tomorrow, St. Patrick's.
It sure is.
Mm-hmm.
Green Day. So, we're going to be exploring the concept of represented at last, from a city being white men to minorities gaining positions in city government and as both elected officials and in administration, and women. And of course, I want you to bring a feminist analysis perspective to all of this.
Yes.
As well as, of course, gays having access. So minorities, gays, women. Mm-hmm. And you've been right in the middle of it.
Yes, I have.
So I'm anxious to hear your analysis.
But I'm tired. Just kidding. Anyway.
I think we should just go ahead and talk.
Okay. Let's do it.
So, but before we get into that, tell me briefly who you are, who your family is.
My mother is Mary Evelyn Bevan, and she was born outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania. Her father worked as a carpenter. He also worked in the coal mines. Her grandfather, James Kerrigan, ran the coal mines. He was the superintendent in that area. And my grandmother is Evelyn Geraldine, and that's where I got my name. And her name is Evelyn Geraldine Kerrigan, and then she married Jack Bevan. And he was from, at first they kept telling me he was from England, but I've done a lot of research and he was actually from Wales. And I don't know why they never wanted to tell us that, but anyway. But my grandmother was very Irish and very Catholic. And she had 11 children. And every time she had a child, she put them in the orphanage. I learned this from my mother many years ago, and she said, we were talking about something about lice in hair and kids and stuff, and she said to me, do you know how they get rid of lice? They put kerosene on the hair and stuff. And I said, where did you learn that? And she said, your grandmother would put us all in the orphanage while she had the baby. And because she couldn't cope. Apparently my grandfather was an alcoholic, and he'd get drunk and he'd get her pregnant. And so this went on for 11 times. And finally they decided to move to
Sorry, I thought that people left the room.
Finally, they decided to move to California, and I just found out a couple years ago from one of my mother's cousins who contacted me that my grandmother sent these 3 little kids out on a train from Pennsylvania to Union Station, and supposedly my grandfather was supposed to be there, but he didn't show up. So Catholic Charities was there, and they gave them a stale loaf of bread and some peanut butter. And to my mother's dying day, she loved peanut butter sandwiches. I never understood why, but she did. So
they saved her life.
She had a rough time, and they lived over on Santa Fe Avenue, and that inevitably became the Gold Star Mother's home. And my grandmother and my 3 youngest aunts lived with her. And my grandmother cooked for the rectory for St. Lucy's, and sent my mom out to work when she was 16 years old, and told her to use her sister's Social Security number. So for years my mom didn't get full benefits because she had used her sister. They were very poor. And every kid in the family had to work. My mother, I think, had some abuse, I didn't learn that till much later, but I think she did from her brothers. My mom decided she was going to get married to get out of the house, and somebody set up a blind date for her in the Pike area, and she met this young Marine who she would have been 17, he was 18, and my dad was born in Maryland, Churchill, Maryland, to German parents, totally German. And his mother died when he was 2. She got a ruptured appendix, and he was sent off to live with his grandfather. And he lived on a farm, and then at 17, he signed up for the Marines, and then he's a very smart guy and got stationed on a ship instead of the regular Marine stuff. So he was stationed on the USS Topeka. It was ported in Long Beach. That's how he met my mom. He then was sent to China for a year, and he corresponded with my mom. And anyway, so when he came back, they got married at St. Lucy's on the west side. They had their wedding reception at the Silverado Recreation Room.
And what year is this?
That would have been 1949. And I was born a year later, in 1950, and I was born at the Naval Hospital, which is now the Veterans Hospital. And I was in the last group of babies to be born there before they turned the hospital over to the VA. And the reason my mom said she got in there is my grandmother worked as a nurse's aide and somehow got her in. So, I don't know where I would have been born because they didn't have any money. So my dad immediately got a job. He got it with Kaiser, which was a car company, a car manufacturer in the area. And then he wound up going to way out to Torrance for 34 years and got a job with an aluminum company. It's called Harvey Aluminum. And worked there, got up every morning and, drove from, we first lived in Lakewood and first lived in Long Beach at the Cabrillo Homes, Cabrillo Housing.
The which home?
Cabrillo Housing. It was actually Truman Boyd Manor.
Right.
And so we lived there for about 3 years. And 3 or 4 years, and then they bought their first home in Lakewood on Downey Avenue with my dad's VA.
Big deal.
It was a huge deal, but it started my mother wanting all these new homes. So they moved there, and then my parents actually helped start St. Pancratius because the church had been at the Lakewood Theater on Carson, in the Lakewood Movie House, and so the church raised money and built the building, so they were there. And the priest told my father he had to convert to Catholicism and get a vasectomy because my mom kept miscarrying, and he said, she's going to die.
That's very interesting.
And he just was upfront with my dad. My dad converted figuratively. My dad was born a Lutheran, and he just didn't like the Catholic Church, but he did it because he wanted peace in the family. And so I wound up having a brother who was 3 years younger, and I had a sister who was 5 years younger. They both have passed away. Mm-hmm. My brother passed away 2.5 years ago of brain cancer, and my sister passed away about 6 years ago of leukemia.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Let's stop here.
Zoom. Or just simply, you're recording now.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
I
So,
put Plaza 3.
yes. Continuing Gerrie Schipske's story, we're trying outside with less sound interference, and the family moves to Lakewood.
We went to Lakewood. We lived on Downey Avenue. And then for some reason, my mom wanted another house, so we moved. We lived on Michelson Avenue. And then we moved to Downey Avenue. And we were there until I was about 5.5. And then my mother, no internet, I don't know where she got it. She found these brand new homes being built in Buena Park. And so she convinced my dad to buy a 2-story home in Buena Park on Poinsettia Avenue and right off of Beach Boulevard. And so we were there from ages 5 to 10. And then we moved to another house in Buena Park that was right behind what became Movie Land Wax Museum. And I spent my summers, going to Knott's Berry Farm because it was open and nobody charged, and they had a trout pond, and we tried to fish in it. I mean, it was just an interesting time in Buena Park. My dad continued to, drive all the way to Torrance.
So much longer from there.
Yes, but I asked him one time why we never moved to Torrance, and he said he didn't particularly like Torrance, and he worked there, but, So I was there till I was 21, and I went to St. Pius V Catholic Elementary School from 1st to 8th grade, and I know we tell these stories to grandkids, but I walked pretty much a mile to go to school through the dairy farms.
So your siblings were going there too?
My siblings went when they were old enough to go, so we continued to walk and then bicycled at some point. And so I went to St. Pius V, and it was taught by the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange, and I absolutely adored them. I just thought they were wonderful, and I thought, well, I want to be a nun. So I was going to go in to the high school convent, and my father said no. My father said absolutely not. And my 8th grade teacher was a nun, talked to my mom and said, she can wait. She can wait till she's out of high school. So I went to Marywood High School, which was in Anaheim Hills at the time. It's subsequently went out of business, and they turned it into expensive homes because the church would not help the nuns when they ran into financial problems.
So how did you get there?
This is interesting. The first 2 years, I went by a bus that my parents paid that was run out of the school. There were a couple of kids from my area, from my 8th grade class, and we went to Marywood. So the bus picked up, I'd say about eight girls from St. Pius, but they came to our house to pick us up, which was interesting. And then after that, my best friend from 5th grade, her dad let her use their car, and she drove us our junior and senior year. And so otherwise, I would have not been able to go. I'd have to go to public school because we only had one car at the time, and there would be no way I could go.
It was a girls' high school.
Girls' high school, and that was run by the Sisters of Providence. And it's interesting, the Sisters of St. Joseph were more of a working class group of nuns, and they also had started St. Joseph's Hospital, so some of them were nurses. And I, of course, watched The Nun with Audrey Hepburn, and wanted to be a doctor nun in the jungle, whatever. But I got through high school, and then I went to Fullerton Community College, and I went there till I was 20 and a half, and then I had, as my friend kids me, she and I dated the Marine Corps during the Vietnam War. My mom worked down at El Toro in the commissary, and she's always introducing me to guys from the commissary, whatever. And they had dances at the enlisted club down on base. And so Judy and I would go down there, and we met guys, and we also corresponded for guys that were in Vietnam and stuff. And I say this to people and they don't believe it. I tell you, those guys were the most polite guys I ever dated. They were just respectful. They just, they didn't drink. It was just a very interesting platonic kind of, experience. But I fell in love with a guy who was from New York, and he got shipped off to Vietnam, and they had to sedate him to get him on the plane, the Pan Am plane, to go to Hawaii and then go to Vietnam, because he was so nervous. And I didn't know that. A friend took him and then told me later and said, Chuck really had problems, really problems. Chuck had a drinking problem, and so he did his rotation, and we corresponded constantly. And he asked me to go to Long Island to meet his parents when he came home. So my parents were not thrilled about that, and really pitched a fit about it, because they said, "Oh, you unless you come back with a ring, you shouldn't be doing this," and all that stuff. So anyway, we went for 2 weeks. I had never been to New York. It was my first airplane ride. And we went to New York, and they were from Seaford, Long Island, and he took me around. I got to see New York, which was wonderful, just wonderful. And came back, and he just kept drinking more and more, and finally said to me, because being the good Catholic girl that I was, I wouldn't sleep with him, and he said, I can't do this. I can't do this. And so we split up, and he then found his father had cancer, and so he got out of the military and went back to New York. And I got this bright idea. Well, maybe if we could see each other when we were around my parents and in California, things would work out. And so I decided to look for a job in the East Coast, and I bought the LA Times at a grocery store and opened it up, and there in the back was a big, large ad for the CIA. And it said, you get to travel the world, and I thought, this is it. Because my parents had taken us across country a couple times, and one time we went to Washington, D.C., and we were there at midnight, and the Capitol was there. I mean, it was the most incredible experience, and I thought, I want to go back there. That's where I want to go. And then it would be close to New York. So I applied, and they called me immediately and interviewed me, and did a background check and found there was nothing there. And so they asked me, they said, you're hired, conditional on further security, but you're hired and would like you to come back in December. And I thought, no, it's Christmas time. So I said, no, I can't, but I can come back in February. And also I was going to turn 21. And so in February, I packed my bags, sold my car to my uncle, and that paid for my ticket, and flew to Washington, D.C., because I had a friend and her husband. They had just gotten married, and they said, you can come and stay with us for a little bit, because they were in Rockville. So I did. I went. And long story short, the group of people that they brought in were mostly kids from travel agency schools. They had gone around the United States and recruited, and I never quite understood why, except I guess it was a pool of people who could work as secretaries and clerks and intelligence handles stuff.
And if they were at travel agency schools, they were interested in seeing the world.
I think that must have been the attraction, and then instead of finishing their school, they joined the CIA. Well, because the thing is, at the time, I mean, I grew up, my parents were quasi-Democrats, but they got a little more conservative the older I got and the older they got. But they were my mom was very patriotic and very, pro-America, and my dad in the Marines, he said it wasn't a good experience, but he was, I think, patriotic. So there were a lot of young people at that time that joined the CIA because of patriotism, and they thought, we want to help. I'm not going to go in the military, but this is the next best thing, and all that stuff. Not really knowing what the CIA did.
So that's what year now?
Yeah, this would be 1971. So I get back in there, and I go through the pool, and I flunked the typing test. I mean, it was just one nightmare after another, and they cut my entry salary to, it was, oh my God, it was terrible. It was terrible. It was like $250 a week. And so I thought, well, I'm not going back. I'm gonna make it. So I took a part-time job, and I tried McDonald's one day. didn't work out. But I worked for a lab at night, and I measured urines and did pap smears and stuff like that. So that was kind of interesting because I had started out as pre-med. I was going to be a doctor, and then I did the 2.5 years of school, and then went, I'm going to take this break, and did this. Well, what I found, talk about feminism, this was my awakening, because the guys that had similar education were all given higher paying jobs, and they got to be intelligence analysts, and they said I had to be a clerk or I had to be a secretary, and I mean, it just infuriated me, but I felt stuck. I couldn't say anything, and I didn't want to go back. So what I did was, I finally got put into my assignment. But in the interim, the one person in my pool of people that had gone to college had just graduated from Portland State University. I fell in love with her. And she had never been with a woman. I had never been with a woman. I didn't know what the hell was going on between us, but long story short. And so we moved in with each other, and we were together. She was in the Nicaragua section. I was in the North Vietnam, South Vietnam, Cambodia section. And so we were there for about together for about a year. And then we were scared to death. We were scared to death we were going to get caught. We were scared to death that we'd lose everything. We wouldn't have a job. We'd have to explain to our families. And it just got, I think, too intense for the two of us. And I said, well, I'm going to go back home and finish college, because I'm not going to do this secretarial stuff. I don't like it. And if that's all I can do here. And the CIA said that if I finished college, maybe I could do something. So we partied. And when I left the CIA, I was going to go to Berkeley. I went to UCI for a quarter, and before I went in the CIA, and they asked me when I came home, I was going to go to Berkeley. But I didn't realize how homesick I had been, and I didn't want to go up to Berkeley. So before I left, I told the CIA where I was going, because they want to make sure, you're not doing anything bad. I said I was going to Berkeley. And they said, oh, okay, well, when you're in Berkeley, we'd like to employ you. And I said, for what? Well, we'd like you, and this is how they used women in the CIA constantly, to date. They wanted me to date Libyan students in the Berkeley area, because they were concerned about this guy called Omar Gaddafi, who I didn't know who that was. And they'd pay me $50 a date. And then what I would do is talk with them like we're talking, and assess kind of what they put out as a false flag to somebody, and say, I got somebody who'd really be interested in talking to you about, where you lived and all that stuff. Are you interested in that? And if they say yes, then I would turn them over to an agent. Okay, so I didn't get up to Berkeley. I came home, and about 3 weeks after I came home, my mom got a little letter, and it had a post office box in San Francisco, and it was addressed to my mother. And it said, I'm a friend of your daughter's, and I don't know what happened. She was supposed to be at Berkeley, and can you please let me know what's going on? We're concerned about her. So I looked at the name, nobody I knew, and I explained to my mother what that was about. And so I wrote a letter back to that thing, got it back in 2 days, address unknown. And my mom said, well, why would they do that? I said, oh, they got my letter. They have a thing called flaps and seals, where they taught us that you can unseal an envelope and read the contents and then seal it back up, and no one ever knows. And I said, that's what they did. They know damn well who I am. And about a month later, I was calling somebody I had worked with back there. And the first thing Beth said to me was, we got your letter. And so I went, whoa. So I went to UC Irvine, and I didn't know whether or not I was going to go back to Washington at that time, but I just thought, I really did miss the person that I had been with, and I wanted to go back. However, back here I met a guy that was in the Navy, and real sweet guy, just the sweetest thing. But he wanted to get married, and I just kind of knew in my heart that I can't do this. You know, he's real sweet, and it would be nice. So I went back to Washington, D.C. I graduated, went back to Washington, rode back to Washington.
So what did you graduate in?
I got a degree in history, and the reason I got the degree in history, I took 183 quarter units in 9 months.
Oh my gosh.
I was motivated, and I graduated on the dean's list, and what I did was I love history, but I came home and looked at the catalog and calculated what I could do in 9 months, and history was the area I could do in 9 months. And while I'm doing this, I was taking Latin American history, and my professor said, you know, if you do some research, maybe we can get it published for you. And I thought, all right. So my friend, whose sister was the American Airlines stewardess, was stationed in Lima, Peru. Not my personal friend, but my other friend. So I went to Peru for 2 months. I took my work-study grant and cashed it in and used it to go to Peru. And I went down there and I interviewed the woman who was the head of the Consejo, which was like the League of Women Voters, but I interviewed her about voting and women in Peru, and this was a big thing to them, and came home and wrote an article, and my professor got it published in the Journal of International Affairs, and it was about the women's movement in Latin America. And so that was exciting, and so I went back to Washington, D.C. with my bestie from 5th grade. We drove across country, and we were going to go to Rome and then Greece and spend the summer, and then I was going to look for a job. Well, when I got back there, I got in a car accident while I was at lunch with my ex, and I hurt my neck, and I had to send my friend on to Rome, and said, I'll meet you there because my car's demolished, and the attorney said, you can't leave. If you leave, whatever. So in the interim, I contacted my ex, and she was adamant. She was dating some guy, and she said, no, we're not doing this. And about a week later, she called me. She said, come on over, let's have dinner. So we had dinner on Friday, and I left 5 years later. She was still in the place that we originally had, and then so we moved out to Reston, Virginia, and I got a job. I worked in Congress. I worked for the Republicans. I worked for the House Republican Campaign Committee. I was in the broadcast division, and I'm a kid, and I would work with congressmen about how to do speeches and radio feeds and things like that. It was kind of interesting. And one night I needed a ride home, and unfortunately my boss was drunk, and he tried to made a move on me in the car, and I said, no, I'm not doing this. He said, well, then you're not going to have a job here ever. And so I went back and talked to the congressman who was in charge of the committee, explained, and they knew about Gerrie. They knew Gerrie was a heavy drinker, and he said, how can we help you? So they helped.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they helped me get a job with the House Minority Leader, John Rhodes, who was in line to be Speaker the next go. And
from Arizona.
That was interesting. I never worked directly with him. I just worked directly around him. I mean, and then in the interim, I got a master's degree in legislative affairs.
Oh, wow. And where did you
George Washington University.
Oh, very good.
And the classes were held in the Library of Congress. It was really exciting. I work all day, and then I go across the street to the Library of Congress, and that's where our classes were. And it was taught by people who worked on Capitol Hill, and it was a wonderful program.
Wow,
I just loved that program.
progression of jobs.
Well, I figured if I was going to stay, and also I really wanted to run. I got the Congress bug, and I really wanted to run for Congress, and so I would have been 25 or 26 at the time, and I decided. Well, my partner took a job that required her to go overseas, and while she went overseas, she could save all the money that she made was tax free, and she bought a new car, and she could sell it and keep all the money and all the furniture. So we were going to use that money, and we were going to move to either San Francisco or Portland. She's from Portland, and. So, I thought, well, she's going overseas, and I thought, I really want to do this. You are not going to believe who they set up a meeting with me to run for Congress. Roger Stone was an asshole then, but Roger Stone and Terry Dolan, who started CPAC, which is that big conservative political action committee, and he was gay, and he died of AIDS, and they never admit that he was gay. But so Terry Dolan and Charlie Black, and who's that? That guy that real right-wing nutty congressman, Bob Dornan. Okay, because he really had the most sophisticated campaigning through Richard Viguerie. That was the first time they were really using direct mail. And Richard Viguerie was an expert in direct mail. So they all met with me, and they said,
But you don't have a place. You're not living in Oregon or San Francisco, but you're investigating running there.
Well, because I thought if I ran, you can live anywhere, and then I get her to live, and we would wind up staying in Washington, and I'd represent California. I mean, people do that all the time. So I said, okay, but then what they wanted me to do, they weren't interested in me winning. They wanted me to bloody up Jerry Patterson in Santa Ana, who had a district that ran in Santa Ana area. And that just turned...
Which party was he?
He's Democrat. Jerry was Democrat, and they wanted me to run as a Republican, and they wanted me to... And I just didn't have a stomach for that. I came home and went, I don't want to do this. But I came home because I was recruited by the city of Long Beach. And John Deaver had just been selected for city manager. And we get this every once in a while. For city manager, because John Mansell had gotten in a lot of trouble, and a citizen group came together and said, "Listen, we want to bring in a new city manager." I'm going to stop this.
Yes.
Okay, I have to remember that. I don't know where he came from. It's a long road, but this gets me to Long Beach. Huh?
I don't think this was recording.
I thought it was. Did you hit resume? No, it didn't record.
Did this one?
Hey, I'll tell you. What happened was, So I put up feelers because I knew I had to work. It didn't matter if I was interested in politics. I knew I had to have a job.
Right.
And the director of government relations for the city of Long Beach was open. And no, the assistant was open. And I sent my resume in, and I got a call back from John Shirey, and he was the director. And he said, I look at your resume, and he said, I think we have filled the assistant. He said, but the city manager is looking for his immediate staff. And would you be interested? I said, well, yeah, let me know what that is, because you keep talking. I'm going to tell you. So I sent my stuff to the city manager, and what had happened was apparently there had been a citizen committee in Long Beach to reform Long Beach. There's two things going on. The Press Telegram was controlling city government, and the LA Times was starting to expose that with David Haldane's columns about what was going on in the city. And a group of citizens with Legal Women Voters and others got together And they said, listen, we need a variety of things to make Long Beach better. And one of them is we need a public information officer, citizen participation coordinator, because we need to get people engaged and we need to get information out about what the city's doing. So that's what I was hired for. And so John flew all the way back to Washington. He interviewed, at that point I was working for Congresswoman Shirley Pettis, who at that time represented San Bernardino and Riverside County, because there was hardly anybody out in both counties. So both counties. And I had actually been hired by her husband, and the day I went to go to start work, we got a call from the White House, and the White House said they found his plane and he was dead. He'd crashed in San Gorgonio Pass. Oh. And so they didn't get my paperwork in time from the office, so I didn't have a job. So I went to work for the Natural Gas Supply Committee and did PR with them. And then as soon as Shirley got elected, she beat 13 men. Shirley got elected. They called me and said, would you like to work for her? And I said, absolutely. So I went to work for her, and I was her press secretary and legislative assistant.
Wow.
Yeah, well, that was an incredible experience, because she trusted me so much. And she just let me do whatever I wanted to do. And we had radio shows, and I interviewed all kinds of people with her, and we did all kinds of things. They got her on the front pages, and she trusted me. And she trusted me. She put me on the phone. She'd be calling from the House floor about a vote. And she'd say, well, Congressman so-and-so was Lagomasino at the time. He said I should vote this way, but you said I should vote that way. I'm going to put you on the phone with Congressman Lagomasino, and you can explain to him. I was only 26, and I'm full of myself. That's why I thought I could run for Congress. I'm just full of myself. So anyway, so John came out, he interviewed me, and he offered me a job. And so my partner and I said, okay, listen, she was going to take off to South America, and I was going to, she was going to Bogota, Colombia. And
were you worried at this point about? Did people know that you were in that lesbian?
They didn't, and we were still scared, still very scared. I'm writing my memoirs, and it's called How the CIA Made Me Gay. I swear I did not know, and that came about. I was in the security room, and they were doing my lie detector test. And I had heard from the other group of people that one of the questions they're going to ask you is, have you engaged in homosexual activities since you're 18? And I said, I haven't engaged in homosexual activities at all. And first of all, homosexuals are men. I had no concept of lesbians, okay? No concepts. So I get in the test, they strap me up, they get through, I'm just whipping through, no drugs, no arrest, no problem. And then I have to ask you one more question, since 18, have you engaged in homosexual activities? And I said, no. And I got a muscle spasm, and the needle went off the thing. This is a true story. And so when I get out, they bring this little lady in, and she said, oh, Miss Schipske, come with me. Let's talk about, do you feel okay about this test? Is everything okay? And I was outraged. I said, why would they ask a woman if she'd had homosexual activities? That's for men. And I said, yes, I'm offended by that question. Well, that question nagged the shit out of me for a long time. And I kept thinking, did it find something that I didn't know? I mean, that's how naive I was at the time. And I thought, why did I have that kind of reaction? So anyway, so that was kind of the joke. So when I got involved with this woman, she said, you passed the polygraph test? And I said, yeah. And I said, you passed the polygraph test? She said, yeah. I mean, so it was kind of like our indicator that, at that time we weren't. Anyway, so when I went to work, so we were constantly scared. We got followed several times. My boss would pull me in. We used to take off for the weekend and go places, and my boss called me in one weekend, and she said, do you like your job? And I said, why? Well, the woman that I was with was a super feminist, and so she decided we should go up to see the launching of NWPC at Queens College. So we went up for the weekend, and they knew it. They knew, the CIA knew it. And they said, well, then why did you go to that feminist organization? I went, I was
What
just
does that have to do with my job?
exactly. I said, well, but you have to understand, I was in my early 20s, scared to death because I thought, well, that was my livelihood, and I had no idea. And this relationship I was having was something I'd never had, and it was scary. And I thought, oh my God, they're following us. We went to the Cellar Club one night, which is in Georgetown. We walked across the bridge, and Emmylou Harris is from there, and she was just starting, so we went over to see her. And on the way back, some guy pulled over and said, "Get in the car. I'm going to take you to home." And he had a suit on and stuff. And for the life of me, I don't know why, Karen, we got in the car. But we did, because we were silly. But he took us right to our house. He knew where we lived.
So he was CIA.
He was CIA, too. And they were keeping, for some reason, they were keeping tabs. And I don't know what it was. The coup de grace was, and literally coup, was we had moved to Falls Church the last year we were together. And we had a two-bedroom thing for cover because we,
Women had women roommates all the time. You had to.
That's the thing in
You
DC.
couldn't afford.
Exactly. It was a total cover. It was, we could have stayed together forever, but at some point we both said our parents are going to figure this out, because if we're together and we're older and we're not in the CIA, and why are we doing this, So anyway, so she was getting a little nervous too. So we were in bed one night, and I heard our front door open. We had a really nice corner penthouse thing. Our front door opened, but we had put a security chain on there, so it stopped. And I said, somebody's coming in our house. And I said, I'll get up, I'll go to the door, you get dressed, and you come. Because if we both went at the same time, we didn't want anybody, whatever. So I got to the door, and then the door was open, and in front of us was this, what appeared to be a drunken, good-looking man with disheveled hair, and he had a key, and he had opened the door. And I said, "Where'd you get that key?" He said, "Oh, is so-and-so here?" Used some girl's name. And I said, "No, she's not. And we've been here for 2.5 years, so there's no way you have her key." Because they change keys when you move in. And so it's, okay. And so we slammed the door. We called the police. And we watched as he went downstairs. We could see the outside. He was sitting on the curb. And it took the police about, half hour, 45 minutes before they showed up. They talked to him, and they let him go. And they never came up to see us. And he was trying to get in. He was trying to get in so he could say, because I was working for a member of Congress. This even gets more convoluted. The congresswoman I worked for was best friends with George Bush and Barbara Bush. They lived next to each other. They came to Congress together. They were best friends. Her chief of staff, my boss, had sent a private detective to investigate our deputy guy because she thought he was a homosexual man. I think he was. He was a real sweet guy named Jack. He was a realtor, but they apparently didn't find anything. So I think they sent somebody out to find me because.
And who was the congressperson you were working for then?
Yeah, Shirley Pettis.
Still Shirley Pettis.
It's still Shirley Pettis, and Rosa Maria had been George Bush's personal secretary at the Republican National Committee. And she was very protective of Shirley, and she knew I lived with this person. And, but, she had a best friend. She was married, but she had a best friend who came in, and her friend was certainly a doctor. I mean, she'd come in, and I go, okay, this is really interesting. But no, they didn't know, and I was scared to death again that I wouldn't lose the security clearance, but I would lose my job in Congress. And the thing is, because I was interested in running, but also because I was in legislation, I wouldn't be able to get a job in Capitol Hill for the most part. Shirley belonged to the women's caucus, congressional caucus, and she didn't want to go, so she sent me. So I got to go with Bella Abzug, Barbara Jordan, Mikulski from Maryland. I mean, all these, and finally one day, Barbara Jordan wanted to smoke. And said to Barbara Mikulski, I don't want any staff in here watching us. So Barbara threw me out. I got thrown out of the Women's Congressional Caucus. But my boss didn't want to go. She was pro-abortion, pro-choice, but she wasn't that kind of, she didn't want to take it any further because these were real strong, obviously, lesbian women. So
what is your feminist consciousness at this point?
It's growing, and I'll tell you where it's coming from.
Yeah.
It's coming from my partner, and I credit her for a lot of stuff. But she, I swear to God, but she, it's his car. But she was really strongly feminist. In fact, I remember for her 22nd birthday, I bought her a feminist coffee mug in Georgetown, because that was her thing. And so anything feminist that we saw in the newspaper, she'd say, let's go do this, let's go find out. But the sad part is we couldn't have friends because we couldn't be out to anybody, and so we did things in isolation. And I'll tell you, in a relationship that gets very draining when you don't have any outside contact, but we couldn't because we would both lose our jobs.
There was such prejudice against.
Well, I was offered the job to be Pat Nixon's social secretary. And yes,
that's huge.
It was huge. And I called my partner and said, they've offered me this. She said, you can't take it. She says, when the FBI redoes your investigation, see, because we were safe in the CIA for that 1 year, and then they usually, and you don't need a security clearance to work in Congress, and so nobody was investigating us. And she had a security job with the State Department, and they'd already gone through her, so they weren't going to reinvestigate. But the moment I said yes to the job, the FBI, and it would be over for her, it would be over for me. And she said, you can't take the job. You just can't take the job. And so I had to turn the job down. Well, he resigned 7 months later, so, it was fortuitous. But there was this constant thing. We worried. The last place we moved, we knew the neighbors couldn't hear us. We only adjoined one side, and the walls were very thick. We never heard anything over there, so we weren't worried about that. And it was a big, anonymous 10-story place, where we lived before that we loved was in Arlington Village, and it was a townhouse. And the guy next to us was gay, but the people over here were not. And it just.
So you had to rent a place that you felt you wouldn't be found out.
That's exactly what we did.
In so many parts of your life, you had to strategize.
We were going through this constant discussion about, that this was just a special relationship, and that, it's not going to happen again. And, that this is, we just, I don't think really dealt with what the relationship was. But we did it, but we were there, and we lived, and we moved several places. Her family came back several times. My folks came back several times. And my folks did not like her at all. And because she just stood up to them. My mother. Thank you. Oh, I know. Be careful.
His voice carries.
So anyway, we were dealing with the relationship. We were trying to, both of us, keep our job. But what happened was she got a job in security for the State Department, and part of her job was to do what they called bag fags. And that was to investigate people who either were working or applying to make sure that they weren't homosexual, because the homosexual ban had really been put in place in federal government. And they were bound and determined they were not going to let homosexuals have federal jobs, especially with
the they at this point?
The government, the federal government. It was an executive order. It was executive order, and it was that no
which
homosexual.
president did that?
It came out from Eisenhower. but they were enforcing it. And I mean, this was the early 70s, so it wasn't too far. And it was the height of the Vietnam War, and they had this whole thing about homosexuals will not have security clearances. So that was her right. And I just said, how can you do this? And she said, I don't have a choice. She said, this is what I do for a living. I said, yeah, but it sucks. I mean, it's just, this is terrible.
Yeah, you have to investigate yourself sometime.
Well, but that was a personal pull and tug at that time, because it was kind of like, we're in danger of losing our job. And I think she felt she needed to do it because it protected her from any questioning. Whatever. So,
and that is such an antithesis. Feminism is about equity and justice
and inclusion. Yes, I would say to you, the early feminist was not like that. I didn't see feminism like that in the early days. It was more focused on, unfortunately, white women's rights,
access,
and very little discussion about anyone of color. That's evolved, thank God. But in the early days, it was a white women's movement. And, now, Betty Friedan had just announced that lesbians in Now were the Lavender Menace, and they were going to kill Now because we can't be distracted with that kind of thing. So there was that kind of divide. And
at the same time, there was the Combahee River Collective of African American feminists going on.
Yeah.
And in LA were very radical Asian feminists going on.
But not in the East Coast. Not yet. And not in the early 70s. I mean, it just, well, it wasn't as visible. I mean, it certainly wasn't as visible in the East Coast. Right. And you got to understand, I'm in Washington, and we're going through the filter of the Washington Post, which is the hometown newspaper. So, it was a constant thing. And I used to have nightmares. She knew about it. I'd wake up in the middle of the night. I swear to God, before that guy came to our house, I thought somebody was coming in. And
you were right.
I was right. And so after that, I think, Karen, that kind of put a chill on our relationship, because I think both of us realized this is serious business.
People's lives.
And so we did talk about, then what we're going to do, we're going to get the hell out of Washington. And she was supposed to be saving this money and stuff. So anyway, I came to California. I went to work for John Deaver, and he gave me, I got to have a staff of about 5 or 6 people through the CETA program. That was the Federal Work Employment. And so
was he a Republican? Because he recruited a Republican woman.
I don't know. I don't think so. He was apolitical.
And why do you think he recruited a woman?
Because this is where city government started to change in Long Beach. He recruited me, and he recruited Sherry Suttles. Sherry Suttles was an African-American woman. And he brought us in and put us in charge of really important projects. And that was different. They never had women other than the secretaries in the city manager's office, and anybody that had any kind of power or responsibility. So I credit John to really starting the change.
And where do you think his consciousness came from?
He was considered to be the best city manager in the United States. He was president of ICMA at one time. I know this because the ICMA contacted me and asked me to write a thing on him, because he was just really the most down-to-earth, good man. He was just really good. He came in, he loved his job. He confided in me one time that Long Beach kind of made him sad, because when he was the city manager of Sunnyvale, he used to jog with the staff up there, and they would have dinners and stuff. He said, I can't do this in Long Beach. He said, because it wasn't scrutiny. It was kind of like the inference would be, I'm doing something wrong. And he said that was his biggest sadness when he took the job.
There wasn't the collegiality. There was separation.
He didn't have
hierarchical.
Yes, he did not
in
have
Long Beach, and he didn't want to do it that way.
He didn't want to do it that way. He wanted to include people. He wanted to I don't say just be friends, but he wanted to be human with them and not just their city manager. So I was always touched with that because my office was right next to his, and he'd often come over with his cup of coffee and talk and stuff. But I will tell you what happened is that, and he was the one that went to Eunice Sato and encouraged her to support a status of women commission in Long Beach. It was John. And he tried to get, I think Eunice, not Eunice, but Renee was on the council, or she'd just gotten off the council. But, so it was John. John said, we need this in the city. This is very important for women. And then, oh my God, he put me in charge of trying to push that through. And Eunice, the right wing came in with, they had gone to Sojourner Bookstore that had opened up in 74 and had all kinds of flyers for lesbian events and dances and stuff. And they, no, not 70. Yeah, they opened in 74, but in 70, I was there in 77. So this was 77, 78, 80. And so Nola Meredith, I'll never forget her, in a little paisley suitcase, had gone to Sojourner and had this big pile of flyers of where to go for lesbians. I was so excited because I was so lonely. I was so lonely. My partner was overseas and I didn't know anybody here. And I was so lonely, and I went, oh, this is great. Thank you for bringing these in. But she said, see, this is what's going to happen. If you have a women's commission, you're going to get all these lesbians. I'm thinking, good. What's wrong with that? And so I went over to Sojourner Bookstore right after because I didn't know it was over there. And I'll never forget, Carol Irene and Marie Dominguez owned it. And Carol said, she said, I saw you come in, I saw you looking around at all the books. And she said, and when I asked you, is there anything I can help you find? I said, no, I'm looking for a book for my nephew. Anyway, so the right wing started to push back, and they went to the state senate, and they went after the women's studies department at the same time, because Betty Brooks was showing her genitalia. Yes, and they put, people in each of the classes, to really say this, they're not teaching traditional what it is to be feminine and all the stuff they're doing now. They did it with that. And so there was a big, literal witch hunt over there in women's studies. And so Eunice freaked out. Eunice, because they took the stuff to her too, and she freaked out, and she was very, very anti-gay. So I'm thinking, oh shit, what if John finds out, or what if any of these people find out? I'm out of here again. I'm not again, but I'm going to be losing a job if this happened. And so no one ever asked me, because I said to myself, I'm not going to lie ever, but no one ever asked me. And so along came this woman by the name of Jean Harris. And Jean Harris showed up in my office wearing a man's suit with big electric hair, and she wanted to come and talk to me about the Women's Commission. And so she came in, and as it turns out, she got a seated job. Long Beach had been under a civil order to get women trained to be firefighters because they weren't letting women in the fire department. And so Jean was in that program to be trained to be a firefighter, but her job was to go out and tell women that this program was available. So anyway, so she came into my office, and she we talked, and she came in with you needed to have known Jean. Jean died a couple years ago. But Jean loved to go after straight women. And so I was her target. And so she comes in and, oh my God, and she just says, well, we talked, and she said, we need this women's commission. I said, I know we do. So she leaves, and my boss comes to my office, John, and he said, what was she, he knew her, and he said, what was she doing in your office? And I said, I don't know. I literally don't know. I said, she just showed up, and she said she wanted to talk about the Women's Commission. And he said, you need to be very careful, because once I'll never forget this line, once homosexuals get into city government, they bring all their friends. And that's all he said. And John talked real low like this. You really could not hear him in staff meetings most of the time. He just talked like this, very slow. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what does that mean? I mean, I'm living by myself in La Palma. I just learned my partner is, I learned through her sister-in-law that my partner is going to get married to a guy that she met at the embassy who was married, and he's getting divorced, and they're getting whatever. So I'm going through this thing of going, oh my God. So Jean comes back a couple times, and the next time she comes, she brings me the Rita Mae Brown brown paper wrapper book. And I'd already read it, but I said, oh, thanks, I appreciate this, I'll read it. But I never read, because my partner, we read everything, and she'd get all kinds of books, and we would read them. And so it was like, okay, so Jean kept this up. And so they had a council meeting on the Women's Commission, and it was put to a vote, and Eunice voted no and said, I forget her exact quotes, but it was homophobic quotes. So Jean got up to confront in council, and Eunice got up and ran to the council elevator and ran up to her office. And so I went up there, and I went in the office with Eunice, and I said, what's the problem? She said, don't let that woman in. Don't let that woman in. So Jean came up to her office, and I'm standing there blocking Eunice's office. And I don't think they brought it up again, because Eunice said, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to support it. And she made very despicable comments about that. So Jean kept hanging around, and that was and one day we had, this is funny, we had lunch. We went down to Hotel Laguna to have lunch on a weekend, and she, because she took pity on me because she thought I didn't know anybody and didn't know anything. And I swear to you, she, once she found out, we got all the way down there, and I said, Jean, I really need to tell you something. I said, I'm gay, and I've been with somebody, for about 6 years. That was the end of the interest in Gerrie Schipske. It was like, we stayed friends. We stayed friends over the years, but it was kind of like, she kept saying, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. And those books that you brought me, I've already read them, but I appreciate that very much. She said, no, you're not. I said, I am. So we stayed friends.
You didn't fit the stereotype.
I didn't fit the stereotype. And I do think that that's probably why overtly I didn't have any problems, because it was never pursued, and I was never seen with anybody at that time. So what happened is Prop 13 hit, and John had to cut what he considered extra programs to cut money for the budget, and he said, so I'm going to cut the citizen participation coordinator job. And he said, but I'm going to give you your choice. Which department do you want to go work in? Do you want to work in public works? Do you want to work in recreation? Do you want to work in finance? And part of me thought, well, I don't really want a girl job. I want something a little bit. And I thought if I went to recreation, that would be, But if I went public works, Robert Kennedy was the head of public works. He just didn't see any place for a woman in public works. So he told John that. So I said, I'll go to finance. So they made me the commercial services officer, which was in charge of the gas, water, and garbage billing, collections, meter reading, all the stuff, And so I had 103 people that I was suddenly in charge of. And we made some substantial changes, but it took a toll on me because it was mostly women, and they didn't like to be supervised by a woman. They had a guy who was there before, and he had dated several of them, and that was one of the reasons John wanted to change, because he knew what was going on, and they didn't want to be supervised by a woman.
Wow.
And the
layers.
Yes, and then they
of prejudice.
Yes, and then they started to spread rumors, and that I was involved with somebody in the department. I didn't know any of them, and I would never, ever, ever do that. But it was their way. They wanted to depower me. And John didn't listen to any of it. John was very good about that. He just says, so that's, just do your job. He said, you're fine. And the person I don't put this on here, the person I had the most trouble with was Renee Simon. Renee. And she left, and Jan Hall, replaced her. But before that, I don't know what was going on with Renee. And to this day, at all. So I don't know what that's about. I did help her write a resume because she needed to go get a job after she got off council. I think she forgets that. But so Jan Hall went after me, and it was the women that were going after. The press.
Why would Jan Hall do that?
Because she was making a big issue out of commercial services and said that, we were ignoring phone calls and dropping phone calls and not returning. Well, I did an investigation and found out that the system that General Electric, GTE sold us was defective. And they wound up having to replace it and give the city money because I sat down and watched the calls and monitored and stuff. But she never said anything about it. It was just like, she said, oh yes, when people call, what they get is music that's, the song Call Me Irresponsible. She didn't get that. Anyway, but she also got upset because I was getting front page press telegram coverage about how we were working on the problem, and here's what we did, and there was a photo of me, and so it was kind of like, so in between time, I went off to Now. I would go to Now meetings here. They had some in Long Beach, and they.
So how did you decide to go to Now?
Oh, because I wanted to go to Now when I was in Washington, D.C., and we never felt safe that we could. We thought if we went, I went to a Now meeting out in Santa Ana when I first came back to California because I thought that was safe. Nobody would piece me together with Long Beach,
Right.
And so that's why I just, and I don't know, it was a lonely, isolating time, a very lonely, isolating time. And then when my partner went off and got married, I just was, I couldn't.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, well, we're still in contact. She's now one of the most famous artists in the Washington, D.C. area. And she got married, and she had 2 sons, and I've seen pictures of them, and I think they are. And I just saw her last August. She was in L.A. doing the L.A. art exhibit, and she had a work being exhibited, so met her for drinks, she and her husband.
Was she doing art when you were with her?
She loved to do art. She did macrame. She did a lot of macrame and weavings. Wasn't so much into painting as she now is. And I was playing the guitar, and she played the guitar, and and when I talked to her, she stopped playing the guitar. But so we did a lot of different things together, and I learned a lot of stuff. But yeah, she loved art. We went to art museums constantly, and it was funny because I'm Catholic. I could interpret all the
the iconograph.
Yes, explain what those stories are.
Yes.
And so I felt, well, that's pretty good. I know something she doesn't know. But she was very much into art and spoke 3 languages and stuff. So it was a big difference from somebody growing up in Buena to somebody who really, was very sophisticated and knew a lot of stuff. Anyway, so yeah, she's Washington Post. She's had all kinds of write-ups for her artwork, and so it just that. I reevaluated my life at that point and decided that I wanted to go back into healthcare. And my friend from the CIA, who I had stayed with in Lima, she was out here. She was getting a degree in public health. And so she said, why don't you, volunteer at Venice Family Clinic, which is a hell of a ride up from La Palma. But I did, and I loved it, and I wrote their volunteer handbook, and I worked with them on a variety of things. I just loved it, and I thought, I need to go back into healthcare. And I thought, I'm too old to be a doctor, go to medical school, so I went to nursing school.
And where'd you go to nursing school?
Golden West. And at the same time I started Golden West, I met Flo. Flo and I were on the YWCA Board of Directors, and she tried to sell me a home, and I said, I don't have any money. And anyway, so we connected, and that was that. We connected in 1980.
Wow.
We met in 79, we connected in 80.
How'd you get on the YWCA board?
When I was with the City of Long Beach, the executive director came to me and said, we really would like you to join the board. It would help because I'd been working on the Women's Commission, and the Y at that time was very feminist, and they were working on battered women and domestic violence, and she said, we'd really like you on the board. And so I came in there, and I was set up this thing called Project Potential, and it was to get women and to train them in how to be involved in government. And Carol got, I don't know what happened, Carol Nyholm was the director. Something happened when I was on there for about a year and a half, and then Carol went someplace or never.
Carol was the director?
Yeah, Carol Nyholm. And very feminist woman, I suspect. But so I met Flo, and then so that was 79, and then we got together in 80, and I had already applied and got accepted to Golden West, so I did a 2-year nursing program.
So you were working at the city while you did it?
No, I had to quit. So I took whatever minimal savings I had and lived on it for 2 years. That's why I went to nursing school. And then when I was in nursing school, I forget who told me this, someone said the federal government was funding under Title X women's health care, and that they were funding a nurse practitioner program at Harper UCLA. And so I applied and I got accepted. So that program was about 2 years. But I went to work because since I was a nurse, I went to work at UCI in the neonatal intensive care.
You are driving all over.
Oh, good. That's a fraction. Anyhow, so so I got with Flo, and the rest is history. No.
I think we need to stop for a moment. Let's see.
And a black woman.
Yeah.
And poor Sherry got crap. I got crap. She got crap. Because
Sherry, what was Sherry's name again?
Suttles.
And do you know where she is now?
I don't. I've tried to track her down. I haven't seen her on Facebook. I know, went off and became a city manager someplace. But I don't know what happened after that. She had a rough time. She set up a program called TQM, Total Quality Management, and it was to start doing accountability in city government. And the boys didn't want anything to do with that, and and you have to understand that the city council, for the most part, were businessmen or, retirees, and they came for the council meeting, that's about it. So they weren't really that engaged. City management truly, in many ways, and I think even still now, controls what goes on in the city.
So let's talk a little bit about when you were on the city council.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first you served on the
College board.
And
Yes.
what was your decision to run?
Well, it was in the newspaper. It was very interesting. It was in the newspaper that nobody had filed for the Long Beach Community College Board of Trustees. And I had run one time before that, and I kid because Bob Livingston was a student at the time, and 10 people I think ran, and Bob beat me, and we're friends. But and then so it came up again, and I thought I really, my life changed significantly because I got to go to community college. I couldn't get into Irvine fresh out of high school, and
Because
I test terribly, and I think my PSAT and SATs, they weren't that high. I always kid that, someday they'll come back and they'll take my master's degree from me. And that's another story. I carried my law books in my trunk for a couple of years. And one day I was with Deanna Bonta, who was, we brought her in as the director of the Board of Health, of the Health Department. And she just got her PhD in public health. And we were going someplace, and she opened her trunk, and she had all of her books in there. I said, Deanna, why do you have all your books in there? And she said, I don't know. She said, I think maybe someday they'll say, no, you really didn't get your PhD. And I said, oh my God, that's what I did when I got my law degree. I kept it in there and thought, nope, they're going to come back and say.
I think this is a classic women pushing the boundaries thing.
No, it is. And it's that imposter fear that, they're going to find out I really didn't do this, although I really did do this, and it's like not trusting yourself enough. And I think women, largely it's changing, but women have been like that and have stayed out of politics for that reason. They don't trust themselves that they can do this. They don't trust themselves that people will vote for them. And, so I ran for the college board. This is funny because they had 2 seats and both incumbents were running, and one incumbent had been there from the beginning of the board. The board was not always there. That came up when the K through 14 system split, and 13 and 14 became junior colleges, but they still had the same Board of Education. And then the state said, no, you can have a separate one. And so that's what happened. So that board had not been there forever. And so
Who was on the board, and what year was this?
This would have been 90, when I get set, 92? Yeah, and that would be Trudy Polsky, Bill Miller, I think Don, I forget Don's last name, and then there was an incumbent that I beat, and then Judy Powell.
So there were 3 women.
Yes, there were 2 women who hated each other. They were bitter enemies. They were
what that
never
was about?
They were never nice to each other. They
never got feminist solidarity messages.
No, they didn't. It was astonishing to see because when we had some problems on the board, the one woman turned on the other woman just bitterly, and it was it's not collegiality, no sense of you're one of us or whatever, nothing.
So how did you manage that? What did you do?
So what I did was I looked around and thought, I want to win this. So I called Park Skelton, who had just done, I think, Jenny Orpeza's campaign, and said, I don't have any money, but I really want to win this. And he said, well, if you can come up with $1,000, I found out later he didn't think I had a prayer and thought I was kidding, and he said, you come up with $1,000, and here's what you need to do. You need to go to the city clerk's office and get the names of every person who is going to staff a polling place. They don't give that list out anymore. Okay, and it was several hundred, and you need to write each of them a personal note, thanking them for the work doing polling, and that, whatever. And I did. I sat down and wrote several hundred personal notes thanking them, and then I dropped them in the mail. And I did my own brochure. I did one mailer, and I beat the incumbent.
I don't understand the connection to the polling people.
Because they're automatic voters. Because for sure that they're going to vote because they man the polls, or they staff the polls, and so they're going to vote, and they have family members, and they never get thank yous from anybody, and when they get a thank you, they tell their family, so the family goes, oh, how nice, that's a nice person, I'll vote for that person.
That is wild.
Isn't that wild? He didn't think I was going to do it. He told me years later, because he ran my assembly campaign. He said, I never thought you were going to do that. I said, I wanted to win, and so anyway, I won. I beat the incumbent, the male incumbent, and got on the board, and Beverly O'Neill was the president superintendent at the time.
Who was?
Beverly O'Neill.
Oh, yes.
We were her boss. Okay, and that's a whole
So here's a woman who's the president of Long Beach City College, and you've now got 3 women on the board, and this should be feminist progress.
Nothing, no discussion of anything that had to do with boosting the position of women in any way. It was that old competitive environment that gets engendered amongst women. It's horizontal hostility. Because when I was in nursing, we had that in the unit. The nurses would go at each other. They had to bring a social worker into UCI because they got so bad with each other. Because when you have no power, you take it out on each other. You don't go up and take it above, you take it out. And there just seemed to be that kind of like, it was yucky. One of the board members confronted Beverly about something at some meeting, and Beverly wanted her fired, and she called the board members, which she was not supposed to do. But she called the board members, and I said, "Well, we can't fire her. She's elected. Well, you can make sure she's not president anymore." So, much to their chagrin, the board did, and they made me president. And so...
Did they realize what they were doing?
No, because I brought in district elections. Well, first of all, we had to select a new... this was horrible, Karen. I haven't thought about this in years. We had to select a new... Beverly left. Beverly said she was sick. And she was resigning because she was ill. And so we had to get a new president and superintendent. So I set up a very, democratic, small d process. We had a community, look up their resumes and screen the whole thing. And then they were to send us 5 candidates because I wanted community input. They sent us 5 candidates. And because we didn't pick the candidate that apparently during some interview process had been promised the job, I was summoned to Sacramento by the then speaker to explain why they shouldn't cut all of our funding.
And who was the speaker?
I have to remember who he is. Hispanic guy. They were upset we didn't pick the Hispanic candidate. And so I was summoned, and I had to take our director of HR, and it was a mad. We flew
Talk
up.
about corruption.
Oh, to the nth degree. And so, and the guy that we didn't pick had been, I think he was the president of Costa Mesa Community College, whatever. So I had to go through that. And so then we narrowed it down to 3 people, and then we picked a woman. He picked a woman. And I immediately got a call from a reporter from the Press Telegram asking, was it true that I slept with her? I went through that for about 4 or 5 months. I said, I don't even know this person through the interview process. What are you talking about? Oh no, we heard that you had an affair with her when she was down at I forget. She wasn't a president. She was doing something else. But that's what you get back. That's what it wasn't being accused of being gay. That inference was, but it was like this can't be legitimate.
If choosing a woman can't be legitimate.
Yeah, it can't be legitimate, even though Beverly, was there before. But that's.
So, who starts that? Do you have any idea? Who fed?
Yes, I found out who started it. It was one of the 2 male members on the board, and he had promised the job to the Hispanic guy, and we didn't know that, but he had promised the job. He said, "You're in. Don't worry, you're going to get it." And so he's the one that started with the rumors. And anything to just discredit anything, even though there was 3 of us who picked, 3 of us decided out of the 5 to do it.
So this is the white male. I mean, the diversity was women. Were there any minorities on the board at that point?
No, not until I brought in district elections. And then after that happened, the board became diversified because you got elected from a district.
Your
At that
own
time,
district,
The thing
yeah.
is, I was elected from from 4 cities: Lakewood, Long Beach, Catalina, Signal Hill. Okay, so I ran at large.
No wonder you had so many polling places to write to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's when district elections there came in.
Yes, they came in, and it was because of the woman president that we selected. She worked with me and worked with the County Board of Education. That's who we had to go through, and got them to agree to let us do it without having to have an election. So we got it, and the next election was set out to be district, and then.
So how did that jive with the Long Beach Unified?
Well, then we approached Long Beach Unified, and they decided to
So
do it
did you
too.
work with Harriet Williams on that?
Oh, I knew Harriet Williams in other capacities, but no, we didn't. Management deals with management. The electeds don't really deal with each other. Yeah.
That's what?
Not
How naive is that?
not in those days. It may be different now, but not in those days. Your superintendent dealt with the superintendent, and then they brought it to their board, and we had already had it on our board, so we got that done. So we had district elections in, and
So who was the first minority to be elected? Do you remember?
I don't know because it wasn't in any of my term. I'm trying to think who was.
And there's a real irony about there's dissension on that Long Beach City College board. Just keeps going on and on. They're suing each other.
So unprofessional. And then it's just so unprofessional what they're doing over there. And
I'm backing up, everybody. I'm backing up.
okay, we know you're backing up.
Thanks for letting us.
It's really sad. Well, listen, I just ran for city council, and my opponent put on the ballot statement that her occupation was president of Long Beach City College, not president of Long Beach City College, and that kind of speaks to kind of the lack of information that people are. I called the city clerk. I said, she's not. And she said, well, nobody objected. I said, you guys look at the occupation. You looked at my occupation, and and they said, why wouldn't you look at that? She was
That's
at one
crazy.
time president of the board, but that board that's not an occupation. That's not an occupation.
And that's and the city clerk doesn't care that it's a lie?
Well, she said we could initiate a suit to take it off, and I said no, that
Okay,
was
then
really
we
your
need
job. I said that was your job.
Should have been part of her process
Anyway,
to verify the truth.
But
Oh,
that,
yeah,
but
yeah.
that's kind of what is happening in Long Beach currently with politics. It's just it's a club. It's just a club, and I don't care what sex you are. If you're part of the club, then they're going to protect you, and they're going to and they don't ask. Nobody asks questions, and that gets my other issue is that we have no responsible journalism going on in this city, so there's no accountability.
So the Post.
The Post just went nonprofit, and they're patterned after Voice of OC, which has been a long time investigative journalism out in Orange County. They've done a great job, but it hasn't happened yet. I mean, I've communicated with Melissa Evans, who took it over. I'm glad it's not privately owned anymore by the Molinas. The incestuousness of having a publication cover anything being owned by a major supporter is
Well, that's kind of Long Beach's
harkens back
tradition.
to the beginning of Long Beach.
Yes.
Yeah, my book that I just finished is it's based in 1913 when we had a really corrupt mayor, and they went after gay people. They went after gay men, and they arrested 31 men. And I actually got the original correspondence between the reporter in Long Beach and the publisher of the Sacramento Bee.
Wow.
I got his file, and it is amazing how.
Where was it archived?
Up in Sacramento. I tracked it down. Because I had heard that there were some notes and files, and they couldn't find them at first. And then magically one day I got all these scans, and she said, we found it. And it was handwritten notes, reporter's notes, and his notes to McClatchy. He really enraged McClatchy about Long Beach, and that whole conspiratorial thing that happened, and the collusion between the newspapers, and it was just horrible. Just horrible.
Well, but I just lost the word. You know, setting up gay men to be arrested. And that kept going.
It was to make money. It was to make money.
But it kept going
Yes,
until what, was it 10 years ago? that
Yeah,
they stopped?
2016. And my book goes all the way through 2016. Absolutely. And in the 70s,
And the prosecutors collaborated.
The now's off, now raised the point with the local prosecutor and the police department that they were targeting gay men because it was an easy target, so they made their quota for the month, so they didn't follow up on any domestic violence, any sexual assault. It was all because they could go to the sex crimes unit. And then the other thing that did change is the sex crimes unit, you were appointed for life, so you knew everybody. So when Deaver came in, the police chief that he appointed, Carl Calkins, at the same time I came in, changed that, and he said they could not be on there. They had to rotate. They couldn't be on the sex crimes unit forever. They had to be rotated.
But they didn't stop the...
No, it didn't, because there's been no oversight. There's been no oversight. We still don't have oversight.
They tried to make it a little better.
I'm hopeful, but that, what you're saying is it's gone back from the beginning of Long Beach, from the, I would say it really started about 1913, and it went from there. The people in Long Beach didn't care about, they called them social vagrants, because there was no crime for what they did in the bathrooms. Oh, and that's a funny story. So McClatchy, who owns the Sacramento Bee, is so homophobic, and he's so pissed off that the first Unitarian minister of Long Beach got arrested. He was gay, but didn't have a trial. He just left. They didn't take him to trial, and that these 31 men were arrested. And that, the two big guys got off. They got acquitted. Herbert Lowe was a florist, and Charles Espy was a businessman, and they both asked for trials, and they were acquitted. So the reporter down here, Eugene Fisher, who ran for school board later, was elected to school board in Long Beach for years, but also came up with the idea for Long Beach City College, Long Beach Junior College. Anyway, so he kept feeding McClatchy these notes because he knows McClatchy is so homophobic. And he said, do you realize that the sodomy law doesn't cover what the degenerates in Long Beach did? And he said, it's just a misdemeanor, $300 to $500, which was a lot of time. A lot of money. Or 6 weeks in jail. And so McClatchy getting these notes is getting really furious. So he goes to the state legislature, and he says that the sodomy law needs to be changed to include oral copulation, because that's what the guys were doing. And so the legislature passes the law, and they say that fellatio and cunnilingus are illegal. And about 2 years later, a man gets arrested, and he sues on the basis that the California Constitution says all laws must be in English, and those two words are not English, and therefore people wouldn't know what they violated, and he got his case thrown out. So the legislature had to come back and spell out what it was and say oral copulation. But that's all because of Long Beach. The sodomy laws got changed because of what happened in Long Beach. Anyway, so
disgusting.
But no, it's
comic in a way.
Well, you know what, and that's why I love about history, because it gives you a perspective that there's been elements of everything that we're experiencing now all through our history. It's not like it's totally changed. It's gotten somewhat better, but...
And then there's backlash.
It's,
And you have all these collaborators.
Yes, well, that's what's going on now. Our current situation is not being caused by one person. There's a whole bunch of collaborators that he empowers them, and that's what they want, and that's what we kind of have to break. But anyway, so
yeah. I think we need to stop now, because we need to do this again.
Okay, so we stopped at community college.
Yeah, corruption in the community college.
Well, I don't want to say it's corrupt. I just say it's inept.
Inept?
I'm being kind, but it's inept. It's not, there's a variety of reasons why. There's too much, I think, of a close association between the politicians in the city and the politicians on the board. they're not separate entities. When I was on college board, we never dealt with city council. We didn't, now it's a constant. It's a constant. And that goes back to, we've had city council people work at the city college, and that started that relationship, And what's going on right now in city college, I think Ginny Baxter stopped for me. I got this note, I designed Rosie the Riveter Park, and I had gone to the Guinness Book of Records right before COVID hit and got permission for us to have a thing where we could break the, Richmond had a thing of women showing up dressed as Rosie. They set the record, and I said, we want to break that record. And so I got the license, and then COVID hit, and we couldn't do it. So I get a thing from a friend a couple months ago saying that in March, Long Beach City College was hosting Let's Break the Guinness Book of Records to see how many people dressed as Rosie can come over to that stadium, because we'd had it all set up. And I looked at who was organizing it and said, it's totally political. And I wrote to Ginny, and Ginny is an interesting woman. She's a real strong feminist, a real supporter of women. I said, Ginny, what's going on here? I said, that's my baby. And I said, I wasn't even asked to participate. I don't need to run it or anything, but I wasn't even asked to participate. I didn't even get an announcement. I got it through a friend. So she came back to me and apparently said something, and the person who is scheduling it is, I didn't get a new flyer. A friend of mine sent me the same flyer, and now they've rescheduled to September. And I said, I wrote Ginny again. I said, Ginny, this is insane. Whatever. I said, we have a whole exhibit that you can put up in the office at the city college. We had that all arranged before I left council. And I said, there's just a lot of things you can do to enhance this, but no, it's too political. I'm sure it's too. She's going to push on it. I'll get contacted. But that's the kind of silly stuff that's going on.
Enhance each other.
Yeah. The timing, I think, when it first came out, I think they thought it would help their board member run against me for city council. And then when that it doesn't matter anymore, I think it became, okay, so it's not going to really knock me out.
Wow.
So anyway, but it's that kind of stuff, and it's like, I don't really see, I just have to tell you that I don't see a real solidarity